Footprinting is basically the first step in the hacking methodology. It's all about gathering information. A lot of people refer to footprinting as reconnaissance or recon. So if I start mentioning anything about reconnaissance or recon, you know that footprinting is part of that, right? Now, most organizations share a lot of information online, right? And a lot of attackers take advantage of that information and public records, and also information from things like DNS, WHOIS, and many other things that we're going to be covering in the next few lessons that an attacker can take advantage of to obtain somewhat of an idea about their target, right? That's what we call open source intelligence, which is basically looking at public records, again, readily available information from social media sites, many different channels, from the company's website, information about acquisitions that potentially that company has been doing, so acquiring other companies, or that they actually have been acquired by a parent company, right? So we're going to go through a lot of different steps and methodologies throughout the next few lessons related to this. Now, one thing that I want to introduce related to reconnaissance is the MITRE ATT&CK framework. The MITRE ATT&CK framework is basically a set of matrices, or in this case, I'm actually showing the attack matrix for enterprise, that describes the tactics and techniques from attackers. And by the way, every time that you see TTPs referred to in the internet or documentation and so on, that stands for tactics, techniques, and procedures. And those are the adversarial tactics and techniques, and of course procedures, that are used to perform different things in the life cycle of an attack. And talking about the life cycle of an attack, what you see on the top here are all the different tactics, and tactics actually have different techniques and sub-techniques. And what you're seeing here is basically the day in the life of an attack, or the life cycle of an attack. From reconnaissance, which is what we're actually talking about here right now, all the way to the impact to the organization. And of course, everything in between, from initial access to execution of exploits and malware, maintaining persistence, doing post-exploitation attacks, and different tactics and techniques like privilege escalation, evasion, credential access, discovery, lateral movement, collection, command and control, and exfiltration. Even though I went very fast in those different terms, we will cover each of these elements of an attack definitely in very detail throughout the next lessons. Now, talking about reconnaissance, which is what we're talking about here right now, if I click on that, the cool thing about the MITRE framework, and the reason that I mention it in here, is because they provide a very detailed documentation of each of those tactics and techniques, as well as each of the sub-techniques for each of the elements of the attack, right? Now, in the case of reconnaissance, as you see here, things like active scanning, which by the way we will cover in detail later in the presentation, or gathering information about a victim, including emails, credentials, employee names, and many other things that, remember, this is gathering information both passively, so passive reconnaissance, or active reconnaissance. And the main difference is, of course, in active reconnaissance, you're basically sending IP packets to your victim, right? So I put here V for victim. So in this case, of course, you're interacting with their systems. Now, in passive reconnaissance, you're actually going over what we briefly mentioned before: open source intelligence, public records, DNS information, even certificate information about the certificates that have been issued for the web services of that company. It can be going through social media sites, going through acquisition and integration documents that may be public, also public financial information that you will get, especially if the company or the organization is a publicly traded company, and many, many, many other sources, right? And we will go over in detail about those sources, the methodologies, and the tools that will help you automate the reconnaissance process, right? But again, if I wanted to actually summarize it, this resource from ATT&CK is invaluable. So I strongly recommend for you to become familiar, not only because of reconnaissance, but throughout the attack life cycle with the tactics and techniques that are in the attack framework from MITRE. And specifically because these are real life attacks and real life techniques that we have seen in the industry. As a matter of fact, I have contributed to the MITRE attack framework. That's why I'm a little bit of a fan in here as well. And specifically in the network attacks and some observables and some documentation that we actually have for the matrix for network. And we will go over a lot of those details again later in the presentation.